So a very warm welcome. I want to introduce myself. I'm Susanna Streeter. I'm a former BBC Business anchor. I'm now a financial commentator and a good friend of Arctic Frontiers. And I'll be interviewing all the experts that will be here today, both the speakers and those on the panels. And they've come from a really wide spectrum, from business and industry, from politics as well, from academia and science. Now, as many of us already know, Scotland is one of the Arctic's closest neighbours, and the nation shares many outlooks and features and, of course, experiences. And so what we want to do today is share the Scottish experience with the Arctic, but also find out what Scotland can learn from the expertise and experience right across the region, particularly when it comes to energy solutions and the sustainable blue economy. I am really delighted to be here in Aberdeen. Actually, from a trip that I made here in my teenage years, Aberdeen has become known in my family as the place with the best fish and chips in the entire UK. So later on, I'm going to really see if that still stands. So any tips that you can give me during this conference, that would be most appreciated. But before we get into what's a really packed agenda today, I've got a little bit of housekeeping for you. So you'll be relieved to know, no planned fire alarms, but if the fire alarm does go off, please evacuate the building by the nearest safe exit. The fire exits are all signposted, very close to the conference area. Is the black backdrop. That's the best exit. Please leave the building and gather at the muster point in the far corner of the car park, and a member of the Science Centre staff will meet you there. Toilets are located on the ground floor, and if you head outside to smoke, please do move away from the front doors of the centre and dispose of your cigarettes responsibly, and all the Wi-Fi details are on the sheets printed and dotted around the conference area. Now, let's return to the main event, because it was just a few weeks ago, in fact, that I was in Tromsø in northern Norway for the main Arctic Frontiers event for 2023 with the Arctic community, and it was really fascinating to speak to so many people right across the region about the issues affecting the development and the transition to a cleaner, greener economy. And one voice that we heard loud and clear at that conference was from Angus Robertson, the Cabinet Secretary for the Constitution, External Affairs and Culture of Scotland. So here's a short video about what went on and just why it's so relevant to Scotland.
Arctic Frontiers is an amazing meeting place. It brings together decision makers, academics, experts, researchers, people who live and work right across the Arctic and high north, right around the world. Scotland is the most northerly, non-Arctic nation in the world, so it really matters that we're plugged into our near neighbourhood, which is why the Scottish Government plays an active part in Arctic Frontiers meetings. And I'm absolutely delighted that the next meeting of Arctic Frontiers abroad will take place in Aberdeen in Scotland.
And here we are now, and I'm really delighted to welcome back onto the stage Angus Robertson. So please do give him a warm welcome for a keynote address. Thank you. Lovely to see you.
Many thanks, Susanna, for your kind introduction. A very good morning to you all. Very good morning to Aberdeen. I'm glad that we can count on your expertise to steer today's discussions and explore new opportunities for Scottish Arctic collaboration. And a very warm welcome goes to all of you here today, in particular those of you who've travelled far to be here. Thanks for joining us and being an active part in this event. I'm pleased to see people from across Scotland, from academia to social enterprise, from the business sector to members of the Scottish Parliament. There's a rich and a diverse experience in the room. It's further evidence, if any evidence was needed, that the interest in building new links with Arctic partners stretches across our nation and across our sectors. Special welcome goes to those delegates who've travelled from afar to be here, from countries including Norway, Canada, the Faroe Islands, and Greenland, just to name but a few. And thanks to Urma's Pate, MEP, there will also be a very warm welcome contribution from the European Parliament, and Scotland has a long history of collaboration with European Union institutions, and those relationships continue to be of great value. I'm also delighted that the Norwegian government is represented here today by State Secretary Tomas. Norvoll. Look forward to hearing from you shortly. I really look forward to hearing his and Urma's views. As the video showed, I was in Tromsø last month to address the main Arctic Frontiers Conference. I joined a panel discussion on rural depopulation in a session together with Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre and Senator Murkowski from Alaska. And once again, Arctic Frontiers provided an ideal platform for Scotland and Arctic nations to learn from each other and to reflect on our similarities. Scottish ministers have addressed the conference every single year since 2019, and we look forward to that continuing. So it's great to welcome Anu and her team to Aberdeen today. Thank you for working with us and giving Scotland its own place in the history of Arctic Frontiers Abroad series. By hosting today's conference, we're delivering on one of the commitments made in the Scottish Government's Arctic policy framework. Our document starts off from on one key fact, which you probably will be hearing a lot of, which is namely that Scotland is the world's most northerly non-Arctic nation. The historic county of Sutherland, in the far north of mainland Scotland, derives its name from Suderland, meaning the southern land. And words like hooses, bairns, even kilts tell a story of linguistic crossover with our near neighbours. Added together, this provides a powerful perspective on where Scotland sits in the world. Seen from an Arctic standpoint, our location at the edge of Europe is far from peripheral. We are in a key strategic position connecting the European Arctic with Central Europe and also with North America. And of course, cultural and historic connections work both ways. Looking further west, almost 4.5 million Canadians report Scottish origins in the 2021 census. People of Scottish descent make up about 13% of respondents in the Northwest Territories and 21% in Yukon. While international interest in the Arctic is growing, few nations can count on such rich connections with the region as a whole. What Scotland and the Arctic also have in common is a wide set of challenges and ambitions, often arising from rurality and from low population density. We've long worked together to develop joint solutions to common causes and common issues. Indeed, Scotland was a valued contributor to the European Union's Northern Periphery and Arctic programme, with more than 40% of the projects in the 2014 to 2020 round having at least one Scottish partner. The UK government chose to step away from the NPA and other European programmes, which we very much regret, in yet another practical example of the harm that has been caused by Brexit. In contrast, the Scottish Government is continuing to explore channels to associate with the NPA and other programmes in the future. We also remain committed to supporting exchange of knowledge and best practice with our Arctic neighbours. Therefore, delighted to announce that a third round of the Scottish Government's Arctic Connections Fund will open for applications today. The fund continues to address critical themes, including fuel poverty, food security, nature protection, and inequalities. Scottish-based organisations can apply for grants worth up to £10,000 to work with Arctic partners and bring tangible benefits to our communities. Today we'll be focusing on two key themes: just energy solutions and a sustainable blue economy. And Aberdeen offers an ideal backdrop for these discussions. The northeast of Scotland is a global centre for the energy industry. The region is home to a range of pioneering green energy projects and has taken a leading role in Scotland's just transition journey, which will be discussed in the course of today. Our new energy strategy reaffirms the importance of working with our neighbours to build regional infrastructure that can meet domestic and international renewable energy demand. The northeast of Scotland will have a key role in that. And Aberdeen has also been an active port for almost 900 years and has always been well positioned to benefit from the valuable industry that the North Sea offers. The Scottish Government has taken a strong international leadership role by setting out an ambitious blue economy vision for Scotland. The document describes our high-level ambition for transformative change in the way that we use our oceans between now and 2045. To harness blue resources in a sustainable way, policymaking and science need to go hand in hand. And few sectors are more illustrative of the pace at which Scottish Arctic collaboration has developed in recent years than in higher education. When our policy framework was published in 2019, Scotland had 2 members in the University of the Arctic, an international network of institutions producing research in and about the Arctic. Today, with 9 universities, we have more members than Sweden and of any other non-Arctic nation with the exception of China. And 3 more Scottish universities have applied for membership this year. Scotland's members of UArctic have also come together to establish Scotland's first Arctic research network. And thanks to a Memorandum of Understanding signed yesterday, the Scottish Arctic Network will become a UArctic regional centre. It's only the second such centre outside of the Arctic nations, and I'd like to extend the Scottish Government's congratulations to all involved. It's only when we get together at events such as this that we can truly reflect on the value of these people-to-people links. We've just passed the 1-year anniversary of Russia's illegal full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and the unfortunate reality of this conflict creates geopolitical tensions that could spill into the Arctic. Scotland has a key geostrategic role in the North Atlantic and looks forward to contributing to the stability of the region in its own right. We've already achieved a great deal together, but we could do so much more with even closer cooperation, and independence would deliver this. As a country, we are blessed with extraordinary natural and energy resources, world-leading industries, and above all, a highly educated and talented workforce supported by some of the best colleges and universities in the world. All this and more we can offer to our international partners, including our close Arctic neighbours. Scotland will always aim to be a good global citizen, seeking consensus and multilateralism, and independence would allow us to bring that approach into Arctic and Nordic organisations. But the paths that we intend to pursue are as important as our journey's destination. And to quote a paragraph in our Arctic policy framework, at a time when the Arctic is the focus of mounting geopolitical attention, we put people back at the heart of Scottish Arctic dialogue. In conclusion, multilateralism and pluralism are as important for our international partnerships as they are domestically. We often talk about the need for a Team Scotland approach to achieve ambitious goals, and today's event is a great step in that direction. And Team Scotland needs to work with friends and with partners in our near neighbourhood and further afield to share learning and best practice. That's why events like this are so vital. I look forward to all of the discussions and meeting as many of you as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Angus Robertson. And I'm pleased to say Angus Robertson will be back to take a few of your questions a little bit later on this morning. But now I would like to invite up to the stage Anu Fredrikson, who is the Executive Director of Arctic Frontiers, to give her address. Welcome, Anu.
Thank you, Susanna. Cabinet Secretary, State Secretary, dear friends. On behalf of Arctic Frontiers, it is a great pleasure to finally be able to welcome you to an event that has been a long time in the making, nearly half of a decade. There are meeting documents dating back to 2019 that mention the benefits and learning opportunities of having an Arctic Frontiers Abroad event in Scotland. Between then and now, a lot of things have changed. But one thing that has remained the same is our relationship with Scotland, a relationship we value greatly. Dear friends, Norway and Scotland have many shared characteristics. Rural towns and coastal communities, a deep connection to the ocean, a history of utilizing the landscapes they live on, and being located at the center of energy potential. These same characteristics can bring both challenges and opportunities. Some of these shared challenges were discussed at Arctic Frontiers Moving North Conference in the Arctic town of Tromsø in January this year. Today, we are located 1,000 miles further south, but the potential for just transition and local value creation are the same, whether we are above or just below the Arctic Circle. Both Scotland and Norway were amongst the earliest to economically benefit from energy exports, both nationally and regionally, with the oil and gas booms in the latter half of the 20th century. And in a time where energy discussions have never been more political and urgent, we gather now to focus on how these two nations can again lead the way in energy production, this time with renewable energies. However, with experience comes learning. And it is crucial that we provide a just energy transition for the local communities and provide solutions globally. What does this mean in practice? As we heard in Tromsø in January, local communities, young people, and indigenous peoples must be included in these discussions and in forming solutions. Just transition relies on educating our youth, adapting skills we already have, and harnessing energy possibilities from rural areas. Moving north, from the port of Aberdeen to the port of Tromsø, we also move towards a green transition in the transport and infrastructure sectors. Ports provide stability and opportunities for coastal communities, but upgrades are needed for blue economies to develop. All of this will require knowledge, tools, and data in both nations. Dear friends, the Arctic has a lot to offer to Scotland, and Scotland has a lot to offer to the Arctic. Now it's time to share and develop together. Thank you so much for joining us in our quest for solutions.
Anu, thank you very much. And certainly that is what we're going to be here doing today, trying to find those solutions and share expertise. I would now like to welcome the Norwegian State Secretary for Labour and Social Inclusion, Tomas Norvoll, to the stage to give his keynote address. Welcome, State Secretary.
Thank you for that, and good morning, everyone. And I have to say thank you so much for inviting me to come to this conference. It is extremely good to be amongst the Arctic developers once again. I guess many of you don't know me, but for the most of the last 10 years, I have been the chair of the county government in Nordland County, one of the northernmost regions in Norway. And when you are in that position, you use most of your time to work with the issue on how to create jobs in the north, how to attract people to the region, and how to develop the Arctic region. But for the last 6 months, I've been upgraded or downgraded. Anyway, I've been deported to Oslo to serve as the state secretary in the ministry. So therefore, thank you for inviting me back into my true political family. Arctic Frontier, it is by far the largest arena for policy making on Arctic issues in Norway. It is strongly supported by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and is given a very clear role to develop, expand, and renew the thinking of how to live and develop in the high north. It is exciting that we are now meeting in Aberdeen in Scotland, probably the European region that have most in common with Norway, and especially with northern and coastal Norway. And I'm not just talking about the weather. As a nation, Norway has always been dependent upon income generated in the Arctic. This goes back to the stockfish that started in the Viking Age and all the way up until the 14th century stood for more than 80% of all export from Norway and was crucial for building a modern society. Today, you will find that hydropower, oil and gas, minerals, and of course, still the seafood plays the same role. More than 2/3 of Norway's export revenues comes from coastal and ocean-based activities like fishery, aquaculture, shipping, and energy production. But I would like to share some concerns with you. Unfortunately, you might find me a little bit skeptic and pessimistic for a while. I hope that will change because that is not what I usually am. But we are in a situation where it seems like we have, well, there's no danger that we will run out of problems. We live in a time with multiple and interconnected crises globally. We have a climate crisis, we had a food security crisis, and we still face a global health crisis in many parts of the world. Russia's unprovoked attack on Ukraine has put all plans and agendas on climate, development, and energy in further jeopardy. And while the acute phase of the pandemic is over, we are only now experiencing the start of a severe and long-term negative impact on health, wealth, and development. Inflation is running high, and a global recession is looming. Public finances worldwide are now under pressure. The level of debt is extremely high in many countries, and there are less resources for development, most of all in poorer countries, but this affects us in Northern Europe also. The northern part of Norway faces the biggest demographic challenge in our country. The companies in the area lack both people and competence for further growth and restructuring. If they are to grow, create more jobs, and contribute to welfare services and attractive local communities, they need people, and they need people with the right skills. This is about education. This is about competence, ensuring that more students can complete upper secondary school, providing vocational training, ensuring high quality, flexible, and decentralized education offers. It also calls for active labor market policies to provide support to those who become unemployed due to structural changes. So, dear friends, we are facing some severe challenges. We find them in northern Norway. We find a similar situation in northern Sweden, in Finland, in all the northern areas. Of course, with regional variations, and without being an expert on Scotland, it will not surprise me if you find some of the same situation here. When we are gathered here, we have to talk about energy. New renewable energy is the overall most important factor for developing our industry as well as creating new industry in our regions. Fossil fuel has to be replaced. It is a matter of survival for the Earth. Many new industrial initiatives are linked to this. You see battery cell production, you see hydrogen, you see extracting of important minerals and metals. This is a development that has been going on for some years. It is difficult, but it is doable. The householdings are becoming more sustainable. We buy electric cars, but we're also trying to take big steps like electrifying oil and gas installation. But now the war in Ukraine puts all this into jeopardy. Suddenly, lack of natural gas brings the prices on all energy up to a level unbearable for people all over Europe. Countries choose to find ways to compensate for this, but the overall problem remains, and it is stronger. We need more renewable energy. We just got an official report from an expert group in Norway looking into the energy situation. They had one very clear and simple message. We have to do more of everything, and we have to do it faster. We must increase energy saving, we must strengthen the grid, we must produce more. Much of the potential is in the north and by the coast. We talk about onshore wind, we talk about modernizing hydropower, we talk about solar power, and most of all, we talk about offshore wind. Through developing new energy production, we face new challenges. All production needs one thing, and that is space. And we meet conflicts of interests and problems with coexistence. This reaches a peak when the Norwegian Supreme Court just stated that a wind farm that is already built and set into production was violating the indigenous peoples, also the Sami people's human rights. This is the right to uphold their culture and way of living through reindeer herding. The demands from some are that more than 200 windmills must be taken down. The government's approach to this is that we have to find a common solution on this specific matter, but we also have to make a roadmap ensuring that future projects are not going into the same situation. Onshore, we will always meet conflicts of interest. It can be reindeer herding, but it might as well be agriculture, tourism. It can be landscape worth or protection. And offshore, you will find some of the same difficulties where you have to compromise with, for example, the fishery and not least with fragile marine ecosystems. So whatever the solution is on our current windmill problem in Norway, whether it is to remove some of the mills, to stop them for a period, or to compensate with new lands, or even compensate with money, or probably a mix of the different factors, it must lead to a guideline for new projects that can secure coexistence. But enough of the negative speak, because there are some other indicators that are characterizing the regions in the Arctic. The industry is doing very well, and the potential is endless. In my home county, the turnover in private sector has quadrupled the last 20 years. In the same period, the surplus have increased fivefold, and the export has increased with 1/3, and that is just in 1 year. So the industry is doing very well. The potential is endless because our industry is based on natural resources where we have a strong head start, and we produce things that the world needs more of. The two main sectors are seafood and metal and chemical industry, supplemented with travel industry, space industry, and of course energy production. This makes the northern region in Norway an extremely interesting area to invest your money. But as I mentioned earlier, the population is aging, and in many regions it is decreasing. Why is this happening at the same time as all other indicators are going in the right direction? In political science, we can talk about a phenomenon called the resource curse, or the paradox of plenty. This is a theory that nations or economies with vast natural resources end up with less favorable development outcome than resource-poor counterparts. You will often find poverty, and you will often find lack of democracy. We cannot say that the Arctic regions are non-democratic or that we are especially poor here, but I still think we can speak of an Arctic version of this paradox. You can call it the Arctic paradox. Maybe we are unproven satisfied with just exploiting the natural resources, fish, oil, hydropower, and forgets that the most attractive and exciting jobs is based on what happens to the raw material afterwards. Let me try to explain what I'm trying to say. If you imagine a fish, it could as well be a kilowatt produced with hydropower or a piece of meat, but think of a fish, for example, a cod, 10 kilograms of cod. This fish can be caught by a fisherman or fisherwoman just outside the coast of northern Norway. The fisherman will get approximately 2 pounds per kilogram for the cod when he or she delivers it to the fishing port. This will provide him and his colleagues with good income and represent important jobs. Absolutely nothing wrong with working in the primary industry. My whole family have been, and they are, fishermen, but most of the value creation will happen afterwards. It's all about logistics. How do we get this cod to a restaurant in France as fast as possible? It's about marketing. Why do the French like to eat seafood from the absolute outpost of Europe? It's about further processing. What if we could get the French to drink high-quality fish oil instead of red wine? That's probably a bit odd, but you get my point. Because all these tasks demand something that the primary industry doesn't to the same extent. They need higher education, and they need formal competence. We talk about experts in logistics, economics, engineers, biologists, and so on. These jobs are often not situated in the north. When you combine that with the fact that 2/3 of Norwegian young people are qualifying for university studies, if we do not have jobs for them in the regions, we will for sure lose the battle of attracting the young. It's about extending the value chain, facilitate for new industry, and by that creating attractive possibilities. This goal is included in the Norwegian Arctic strategy because people are the most important resource of the Arctic. It is crucial that the regions are given the tools to develop their industry based on the local and regional advantages. Access to risk capital, venture capital, and other sources of funding is extremely important, as is access to research institutions of top class and top class higher education in the regions. But most of all, I think it is about our own attitude and our own self-confidence. If we advocate that our region, that the Arctic region, it is cold, it is rainy, it's far away from everything, with no future, who do you think would like to move here and work here and live their lives here? We must further develop our regions and cities so that it will be good both to work and to live here. An example from our region is that the town of Bodø, in cooperation with the county, will be the first European capital of culture north of the Arctic Circle next year. And it's also important that to boost the development, it is clearly clever to connect the local strategies to national politics that can offer funding and support for new businesses. And Norwegian Arctic strategy emphasizes increasing northern Norway's ability just to climb in the value chain. And this is an opportunity that we have to capitalize on. The Arctic is fragile, but it's also very rich in resources, and we must prioritize both the environment and the sustainable growth. And we need to create smart and living regions, rise in the value chain, and create more high-skilled jobs that attracts people who would come here to live. So my final message is, instead of doing what I have been doing today, speak of obstacles, speak of problems, you should leave that to us old grumpy politicians, and you should focus on the possibilities. You should focus on the unique. You should focus on the future solution. And I think a good slogan for the Arctic into the future can be the Arctic is cool, it is not cold. Thank you for your attention.
So do please just stay with us for a minute. I'd like to ask Angus Robertson to come up onto the stage as well. We've got hopefully a few questions coming from the audience, so please do raise your hand if you've got any questions that you would like to put to State Secretary and the Minister. But Angus Robertson, if you could come up and be with us. I just want to really start off by asking you, Angus, you listened to the speech, is there a paradox in Scotland as well? Would you say in a similar way to the Arctic paradox? Yeah,
well, I should probably start off, but I can't get the vision of fish oil instead of red wine out of my thinking. I'm sure most of the Scots in the audience would have listened to the descriptions that you were making of Norway and thinking how strikingly similar a lot of the challenges you're talking about in northern Norway, you might say, are the same for parts of northern Scotland or island groups. Immense challenges, but at the same time, immense opportunities. And one of the things that I find so exciting about the thing that we're all involved in is by working together is helping grow an understanding that both of our countries are jointly, uniquely positioned, having won once on the natural resource lottery, which for most places is an amazing thing to happen. We've done it twice. So just as hydrocarbons go out of fashion and are not responsible for the environment, but we have significant economic dependence, as we do in this city, in this region, were it not for the fact that our countries are windy and wet, that we have this amazing opportunity to reimagine. Mm-hmm. And that's what you talked about towards the end of your remarks, and that is why I'm so pleased that we're coming together and we're working together, because I think there will be lessons that you're learning that we haven't yet, and maybe there are ways in which we're further ahead, and by coming together, by our academics coming together, by our various other great thinkers in the audience here and policymakers, that we will make sure that we are able to help the transition that we're going through in Scotland and in Norway, and then also bear in mind what we are then able to offer the rest of the world. Because if we are the groundbreakers, so I could talk about this for far too long.
I just actually, but it's the point that I wanted to pick up on, that you might have won the natural lottery twice, but as you pointed out, State Secretary, you've got to be really careful right at the beginning how you navigate winning that lottery. And you talk about the roadmap that now needs to be in place to ensure that you don't arrive at the situation where you have with wind farms on land and indigenous rights. What does that roadmap look like in practice?
Well, it is actually very difficult, but the main thing is that you have to talk together early. In all the examples where we see that we have get problems with projects, it can be a mine, or it can be a wind farm, or it can be installations also offshore. It is because we have not involved the different parts early enough. We let the process go too far so that we got to a point where it is a go or no go. So we have to include all the different stakeholders at the very beginning and start with that. And we have to develop a common knowledge base so that we can agree on anything that it is possible to agree on before we start to disagree. Because the point is that if you start out wrong, if you have two ships leaving port and the course is just a little bit different. If you travel very far, they will be very far from each other. But if you manage to keep the course together for a while, it will be a smaller gap to close, and that's what we hope to manage in future projects.
Great, thank you.
Can I just reflect on another thought that just came into my mind as you were speaking there about making the right decision at the right time to end up taking the right fork in the road, so to speak. One of the things I think about quite a lot is the range of decisions that were made in Norway in the mid-1960s. When having discovered oil, you literally sent decision makers and experts to Texas and elsewhere to learn how you might do things, but also how you might not do things. And Norway made a series of absolutely mission-critical decisions about ownership in natural resources and how you would develop them, how there would be community benefit. And here we are now in 2023, Norway, a country with the biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world, Scotland, the biggest oil-producing nation in the European Union with no oil fund. So if you want an absolutely critical example of good decision-making versus bad decision-making, we have it during the oil and gas sector. I could go on at length about that, but I won't. I will decide to talk about the positive and say, well, if we are going to learn anything from the first example of the oil and gas, the hydrocarbon period, what is it that we need to learn now? And that speaks to my point of we have to learn the best decisions that we're making so that we can benefit our community, so we can go through this just transition. Because let's not kid ourselves, and I'm looking at a colleague who represents one of the Aberdeen constituencies here. In places like this, and no doubt in parts of Norway, there are people who work in oil and gas who are worried. They're worried about what is my future, what is my family's future as we move from oil and gas, well paid, a booming part of the economy, into something new and for some people unimaginable and difficult to understand how successful that will be. So it's another example of why it's so important for us to work together to make the right decisions at the right stage, so we make the right decision in the fork of the road, to use your analogy.
Great, thank you. I just want to see if there are any questions coming from the floor. Yes, we have one just here at the front. I'll take yours in a moment, but actually, I'll go, given that you're just there, just go there first and I'll take yours in just a moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable and State Secretary. I have the first question is for Honourable Angus Robertson. So I'm working in the Arctic, but I have had a little project in Scotland, working in Fife, in Coastal Fife, in an ex-mining community. So you have been talking about just transition and about renewable energies and the importance of that. What does the Scottish government do in terms of making wind farm? So what does the Scottish government do for the industry of wind farm making in Scotland rather than being outsourced, let's say, in Asia, which has been a big issue?
So the supply chain issue is definitely a live one, because we as you no doubt know, and others in the room do, much of the supply chain is provided from other countries, including Norway, and Denmark, and Spain, and elsewhere. Now that can work both ways, but we are hoping to be a renewable energy powerhouse here. And so we have to ask ourselves, are we making the right decisions so that we can build the supply chain here ourselves, so that we can produce the infrastructure that is required? And to your point, what is the Scottish Government doing about this? Well, we are very, very, very focused on understanding that this is a challenge and an opportunity, and that we have to do everything that we can to incentivize, to help that supply chain grow. And I'm sure you know about this, but as part of the leasing arrangements for the ScotWind offshore floating wind project, the issue of supply chain and the development of a supply chain has been a really important part in that. Will that solve everything? No. Will it happen overnight? No. But is it the right kind of decision, going back to the fork in the road, is it the right kind of decision that will hopefully put us in a better position so we're able to develop a full supply chain here? Absolutely.
Okay.
But any ideas that people have, there's no monopoly of common sense on that. So that's whether people doing valuable research as you're doing in Scotland or in other parts of the Arctic and High North would be very much welcomed.
Great, thank you very much for that. There's a question here at the front. Thank you.
Hi, is it on? Good. Thank you to you both. I don't want to bring in the constitutional debate into things, but the thing that often strikes me is that I'm not sure even if we in Scotland want to build on our connection to Nordic and Arctic communities, I'm not sure whether the United Kingdom government necessarily sees it the same way. For example, if we wanted to do and maximise our potential in renewable energy, there are certain things that we are restrained from doing. We don't even have the ability to take out private debt, for example, and therefore we've had to depend on private businesses to do a lot of our renewable work for us, whereas Norway, for example, with its sovereign wealth fund, can take out debt, it can use its money. So I guess the question is, as long as Scotland remains part of a United Kingdom where 85% of the votes are coming from England, not in Scotland, are we really going to be able to determine for ourselves how we best forge connections with Norway and other countries?
Okay. I think that's a question to me.
I think I leave that.
Yeah.
Although I do reflect on the fact that Norway was one of Europe's poorest countries in 1905 when it decided to become a sovereign state, and it's a good model for us all, I think, in making best decisions and becoming a successful and a socially just country. Well, the first thing about things, I'm a pragmatist, so I'm perfectly content to work with the UK government, and I'm delighted that there are UK government civil servants here, and I think it's really good that colleagues working for the Scottish government and the UK government are working together on Arctic matters. So that's point one. Where there is alignment with things, then we must work together. A good example of that is I've met with the UK Foreign Secretary to discuss what the UK government will do to help support the physical infrastructure for hydrogen directly from Scotland to our continental European markets. Now, if Scotland were an independent country, we wouldn't even need to have that discussion because we just get on with it. So at the moment I have to depend on a UK government minister going, oh, that's a good idea. But at the same time, he might also say, well, the northeast of England's quite an attractive proposition from his point of view. So there's a risk there. Now, if we were sovereign, we would just get on with it. And you then might say to me, well, the UK government also has a series of powers in relation to physical infrastructure, which are very important to us. And again, I need to appeal for understanding there. Now, maybe we'll get that, but maybe we won't. I would like to be in the same situation as our neighbouring countries to just get on with it. But in any eventualities, Scotland will be where it is and the rest of the UK will be where it is. We're going to be on the same island, we're going to be in the same part of Northern Europe, and that necessitates us having a good working relationship, not least because England is dependent on Scottish energy.
Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, I think so long as we are grown-ups and we work together, I think we will all be better for that.
Thank you very much. And just one more question, please, if possible. This question here at the front. And then we are going to have a possibility of extra questions a little bit later for State Secretary Norvoll at the conversation we're going to be having this afternoon. So if you've got any further questions, you can ask them then. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I have a very brief question to both. Everybody says phasing out fossil fuels. Everybody agrees, and transition is needed. But Norway, and I think also the UK, rather than Scotland, is also admitting new licenses for fossil fuel.
Yeah.
How can you justify that?
Yeah. Well, it can look like a paradox. It is a paradox. But there are two main reasons why we do that. One is, of course, the war. So therefore, we are intensifying the production now. It's no doubt that Europe is going to need natural gas also in the future. They're going to need a reliable source for it. And that is one thing that is triggering the activity just now. But it's also what has been going on before the war is that when you're taking this transition, you have to take it in a controlled way. We know that most of the technical skills needed to make, for instance, floating wind turbines. You will find that in Equinor, in the other oil and gas companies that work with subsea constructions. And the worst thing we could do were just to kind of put these companies out of business and say, okay, we just trash that and we start with something brand new. So you have to have a kind of controlled transition where you take care of the competence that are in these different companies, the engineers, everything, in the transition over to a fossil-free society. But I believe that when, well, things are happening because of the war now, and I mean, terrible things are happening, but I think the good thing will be that the transition into a renewable society will go faster. I think the situation we are in now is going to stimulate that process very much, because we all see that we cannot be depending on an energy source that is, Norway is democratic and UK and Scotland is democratic, but most of the oil and gas in the world is controlled by non-democratic and to some extent autocratic regimes. So I believe that this is going to speed up that process as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So all I would add to that is the Scottish Government's position is we've taken a presumption against speaking in favour of new oil and gas exploration. I agree entirely with what State Secretary has just said. I would just point out, for those of you who haven't seen the stats, if you look at the rate of oil and gas extraction from Scotland, even if you were to add further smaller fields into the next time horizon, it still falls off a cliff. We are in a mature energy basin in the North Sea, and that is true for Norway as it is for Scotland. And yes, the war has speeded up some of the transition thinking, but you know, there's also there are significant societal drivers at play here as well. Now, the majority of cars in Norway are electric vehicles. We're seeing a huge acceleration in a change in people's habits here too. So I think the change is happening. I think being cautious about doing things that will continue to damage the environment is something we need to be mindful of. And all I would caution against is thinking that one can just go back to business as usual before the Ukraine war and think that you shouldn't carry on making the just transition as quickly as we can. I can't agree more than what the State Secretary had to say about we really need to get on with this. So if we do that, I think we'll end up in the right place with all of your help.
Okay. Well, thank you very much to both of you for taking those questions. I really appreciate it. So thank you.